very blessed to have a seminar on the topic Ancient Literary Criticism and its Contemporary Relevance. Without wasting much time, let's move on to the official procedures. I invite our department head, Dr. Andrew Thomas, for the welcome speech.
Good morning to you all. The Department of English proudly presents a two-day lecture program by Dr. ANAMIKA CHAKRABORTY, the head of the Department of English of Srikrishna College, Nadia, West Bengal. By the fragment of last academic year, St.Thomas College and especially the Department of English signed an MOU with the Department of English of Srikrishna College. We thank you, Dr. ANAMIKA CHAKRABORTY and Dr. Sudhagar for having taken up this initiative. And as the first program of this MOU, we are happy to host you, Dr. ANAMIKA, for this two-day lecture series. On behalf of the Department of English, we would like to offer a warm welcome to Dr. ANAMIKA CHAKRABORTY, the head of the Department of English of Srikrishna College. She is a nationally well-known young scholar of English literature who has her doctoral studies in the fiction of the very famous Indian-American novelist CHAKRABORTY. She has published two credible works of criticism, both published by Oxford University Press, one a study on the writings of Milton and Pope, and the other on the Victorian women novelists. She is a renowned scholar of gender studies, cultural studies, and mythological readings. And we are glad that Dr. ANAMIKA CHAKRABORTY makes a presentation to our students on the contemporary relevance of ancient literary criticism. For today's talk and the talk to our postgraduate students, and they would greatly benefit from this talk, which is a part of the MOU. A hearty welcome to you, ma'am. Now, I would like to welcome our principal, Reverend Father Dr. Martin Columbreth, who is a very young, vibrant, new principal that we have. A hearty welcome to you, Father, who is also a young scholar from the Department of English, too. So we would like to welcome our beloved principal to this lecture program. I'd like to welcome the members of the department, especially Dr. Sudhagar, the coordinator of the program. A hearty welcome also to all the postgraduate students, as well as our research scholars and other members of the department. Once again, I offer a warm welcome to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for a warm welcome. I now invite our principal, Reverend Dr. Father Martin Columbreth, for the inaugural address.
A very warm good morning to one and all. Dr. ANAMIKA CHAKRABORTY, the HOD, Srikrishna College, Nadia, West Bengal, the resource person of the day. Dr. Andrew Thomas C., the HOD of the Department of English, St.Thomas College, Thrissur. Dr. Sudhagar, and my dear colleagues, and my dear students. Hope that everybody is keeping safe at home. You did not hope that you did not have an encounter with the COVID-19. I heard that some of the students, some of the parents are affected. Anyway, I pray that everybody get a recovery soon. No? And coming to the academic year 2021-22, At the outset of this academic year, you are having a wonderful program organized by our department as well as a collaborative event. We are going to have a series of lectures by Dr. ANAMIKA Chakraborty. I'm happy to be a part of this. And the topic
Further, your mic is in.
the mic off, I think.
Okay, thank you. I'm reminded of a quote from Professor J.W.H. Atkins in the opening of his study of literary criticism in antiquity, first published in 1934. He states, I quote, "Ancient criticism has much to offer all students of literature. There is, for one thing, a definite historical value attached to the works. Coming first as they did in the order of time, they represent the earliest application of the critical spirit to literary matters. And what is more, they constitute the first inquiry into that Greco-Roman tradition in art upon which most of the modern literatures are ultimately based. In addition, these critical works of the ancients possess considerable value of an intrinsic kind. In their pages were first brought to light certain literary principles of enduring value. They were, for instance, the first to set forth certain profound views as to the nature and art of poetry, as well as some of the laws that govern good writing in prose, while they also led the way in the discussion of literary values and in the formation of aesthetic judgments." So I unquote. So we are going to begin a new session. I hope that Dr. Anita Chakraborty is a right resource person. Hope that we have a wonderful session ahead. With these words, with your permission, I declare this webinar inaugurated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Father. Now, I invite Dr. Anamika Chakraborty, Head of Department of Srikrishna College, Nadia, for taking the session. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, all of you. Good morning, everybody. Respected Principal, Reverend Dr. Martin, Head of the Department of English, St. Thomas College, Dr. Thomas, and all the teachers, students, and especially the coordinator of today's program, my friend, Dr. Shamsudhakar. Thank you so much for inviting me today to this enrichment program, which is as a part of this series of part of the MOU signed by both our colleges, Srikrishna College and St. Thomas. And thank you so much for the MOU. And this today's topic, ancient literary criticism and its contemporary relevance. And thank you for this kind of a topic now, because what I think in this time, in today's troubled times, it is more important that we delve into or look into the value of literature more than ever, and not only literature, also the value of all kinds of art more than ever, because perhaps this is the only way to retain our sanity in this insensible play of death and disease that we have been encountering of late, and which has been plundering so many lives, and families apart. So in this context, I think looking into what literature can give us, or what actually literature and all other arts mean to us, not only literary criticism, which is actually the topic of today, not only criticism, but also literary creation. Because literary criticism and literary creation, these are the two significant facets of human life. And creation is as mold as almost as old as human society, human history, and criticism is nearly as old as literature. Now, the study of literature, it requires a knowledge of the not only the text but also the context, which is so much more essential. Like, what kind of a person wrote a poem or a particular play or novel or fiction, whatever it is, or essay, and what forces acted upon the author, or what was the historical, the social, the cultural, economic background while writing a particular text, or was the writer actually following the conventions of the period, or were trying to break away, or rejecting it, or trying to create new conventions. All these, and is literature or literature how is it connected with the other arts like music, like architecture, or whatever, or is there any kind of a connection, or if it is connected or not connected in any way. Now, all these are inquiries that a literary critic makes, and which has been started from this classical period, because the classicists, they form the foundations of most of the theories of criticism that we have today. Though it started, I would say that literature as a serious pursuit, this began during the Renaissance. I hope you all we must be knowing it. I'm just giving a very short background. Like it began it as a serious pursuit. It began during the Renaissance, because during the Renaissance, now, literature meant different things for different people. Like it was history. It was history to people who studied it as a documentation of the events past. It was philosophy, who looked for those who looked for the moral truths. Then it was some they approached it as a kind of as a piece of rhetoric, or the development of language, or like the philologists, they studied it to gain the knowledge of language. So literature meant so many things to so many people, and literary criticism is devoted to understanding and appreciating that literature. And this is how gradually the process has evolved, which has started historically from the Greeks and the Romans. And that is why, because it was a starting point, not only that is why it was important, it has reinvented itself. Anything remains important not only because of itself. Over the years, over the ages, a particular thing remains important only if it can reinvent itself. So that is to be seen, that whether the classical criticism is just an edifice to be put into the shelves and uh, given a value as a dated but a very valuable thing, or is it relevant today? It will be relevant today if it can be able to, if it is able to reinvent itself during as and when it is required in ages, like different ages and different social perspective, different political perspectives. That is how. And uh, historically speaking, ancient critics are always valuable to us because they were the earliest in the point of time, and they started it all. Like they represent this Greco-Roman, this Greek and Roman, this Greco-Roman tradition in the arts, on which the whole Western, the whole edifice of Western criticism actually rests. So there is a great deal to be learned from them, no doubt. and intrinsically they have a value of their own because of that, because they inquired into the nature and the function of art, this two-way inquiry that they had, this nature and function of art. And they have been inspiring, we know that they have been inspiring critics and theorists and literary authors mm, from then and those who came later on. And basically, this thing, classical criticism, originated from classical philosophy. Plato, Aristotle, and all, we know them first as philosophers. The classical philosophers, like these people, Plato and Aristotle, they made a sustained and a very systematic inquiry into this nature and this function of arts and the modes of existence. And not only when they were inquiring it, that not only was the work important, much more than the work, or as important as the work, was the author, was the one who's writing it, like the author or the literary author. And of all the authors during that time, the poet, classical criticism extolled the poet. It was the poets because they were because the poet was supposed to be the guiding star. They were supposed to be the guardian angel of society, and because they were the ones who were inspired by this divine muse. And this divine muse gave instructions to people which was not of an instructions and knowledge to people which was not available with anyone else. So that is why, out of all these literary men, these poets were extolled, and they were the prophets and the priests. They were akin to the prophets and priests of the society because they were divinely inspired, because the divine muse spoke through them. Okay, and the oracles, even, which was so which had such an important place in Greek literature, oracles were pronounced through the poets. So that is why poets were like had a very, very special kind of us, because they were kind of mediators, not just like the priests. We understand, or we think that priests are representatives of God. They are the mediators between God and people. So in classical time, the poets, they were thought to be the mediating agents between the gods and the people. Now, though even in later on in the Romantic theory of the 18th century, then also you're going to find the function of the poet, the poet's responsibility in a society, what function as poet serves in a society. Though our focus today is these four pillars of classical criticism, that is Plato, Aristotle, Horace, and Longinus, and later on to focus on Longinus. But there is one Greek poet I would like to refer to, that is Aristophanes. Aristophanes has also commented on the rights and duties, like because he is such a gifted person, a supernaturally gifted person, a poet naturally has certain kinds of responsibility towards the society. That is what was one school of thought of that time. He comments also on the rights and duties of the poet, because he is the social reformer, he is the satirist, the poet comments on the society and its time. And he is someone who is deeply concerned with the integrity of the society, and who is also at the same time agitated by political demagogues or the sophists and all that. So that is how poets have been extolled in that time. But then if we come to Plato is paradoxical, as we know, though he is and it is often said that the history of Western criticism or Western philosophy, the history of Western philosophy is actually a series of footnotes to Plato. He is the first to expound the theory of art in general terms. His opinions on art have exerted a very strong influence, as we know, in every generation of thinkers. Poets like Philip Sidney, poets like Shelley, Philip Sidney from the Elizabethan age, then Shelley from the Romantic age. They have been ardent admirers of Plato. But this question among these students of literary criticism, this question naturally arises that why is this paradox, this paradoxical question arises that Plato, being one of the most poetic of philosophers, why is he such an avowed enemy of poetry? As we know in Book 10, like if you go to Plato's Republic, Book 10, he has banished poets from his ideal society, right? And he is hostile to this, poets and all, and so he banishes them. And he exiles poets on the ground of two things. One is the metaphysical, and the other is the ethical. Now, metaphysically, if I start with the metaphysical, like all art is fiction. So all art being fiction, and fiction is something which is not true. So all art being fiction is untrue. And the art necessarily, it distorts and it twists and distorts the truth. So the goal of human man is this attainment of art. So if that is so, then art becomes an imperfect reflection of the real world. And the real world, according to Plato, the real world is in turn a very pale shadow of the ideal world. So what happens that art becomes an imitation of the imitation. It becomes an imitation of the world, which is itself an imitation. So art becomes an imitation of imitation. So art becomes thrice removed from reality, 3 times removed from reality. And it's a third-hand distortion of the truth. So that was his stand. But seriously speaking, there are so many facets, and there are so many notes, so many works of one classical critic. So it's very difficult and not, I think, fair at all to judge a person like just only through one strain. But because we will be going to someone else, like another critic, so I will just take one thread and go. That is why, and because of the time and all also. So this was his take on this poet, and he thought that he was a great philosopher, and what he thought was that he highlights the place of the philosophers in a society, because philosophers, with their insights and their intelligence, they can be better moral custodians, and they can be better in looking after the welfare of the society, the philosophers. So, and this philosopher has a right to stand in opposition of any form of artistic creation which deviates from the norms of reason. Because to him, to Plato, like passion, emotion, and imagination, these are the elements that constitute artistic creation. And that is why he's to Plato, like his strong derision is in the ground that it is the philosopher which is more important, because of because he doesn't deviate from this word reason. But still, in spite of all that, and in spite of the fact that Aristotle, among the modern critics, Aristotle is of more influence than Plato, but then we cannot deny the fact that Plato is, of course, a storehouse of knowledge and the value of truth and the significance of literature, all that. And the most important thing is that he is the one with whom literary criticism, classical literary criticism actually starts from. So he's a kind of a pathfinder who has inspired, who has stimulated people and authors and criticism in general, and he has firmly established classical criticism as a whole. He has firmly established criticism in this high pedestal. But it is actually with Aristotle whom Eliot has termed, quote unquote, the perfect critic. Now it is Aristotle being who exerts more influence in the later ages for the later critics and later writers and later authors. But Aristotle also owes his philosophical career to his master, to Plato. And there are many similarities and differences between the two. Aristotle has addressed many problems which Plato has written, though he has never mentioned his name like that in his poetics or in his rhetoric. But but the terms that he has used differently from Plato, from mimesis or this thing, ethics or metaphysics or catharsis, which is actually key to the Aristotelian concept of everything, this catharsis. So it is, he has also dealt with it, but in different ways. And Aristotle dismisses Plato's view that the poet is an instructor. When he says that, because Aristotle says that correctness in poetry is not the same thing as correctness in morals, okay, and or in any other form. So this is the basic where these two people have seen the things differently. And the artistic and the insightful phenomena of Aristotle, his arguments on life and the logic, his impeccable logic. Now, these have made Aristotle's work a delight to study and to follow, as far as his philosophical inquiry is concerned. And because this imitation has been a root word for Plato, I would say a little bit about how Aristotle found imitation. Now, in where Plato says that imitation is just copying, but Aristotle doesn't think so. His contradiction is that he doesn't say that imitation is mere copying. It is not as trivial and as insignificant imitation, the word imitation, because for him it is very dynamic, it is very creative. It is a representation, not actually just copying. It is a representation which, and that is why it is not static. It has a kind of mobility and mobility in it, and that is why, because he says that it is not just copying, and it is actually representation, and it is the artist actually imitates artistically, which ought to be in whatever he sees in a particular work or a particular society. So art is free. According to him, art is free. It is voluntary, and it is a voluntary activity of the human consciousness. It doesn't have necessary to lead to anything. It is not bound. It is free from any ulterior motives. It is an end in creation, is an end in itself. It is free, and it doesn't necessarily have to lead to somewhere. But if we have to delve on the key word of Aristotle, which defines Aristotle is defined by this word catharsis, and that we all know. And catharsis also defines the concept of tragedy, because the twin emotions, no, the twin emotions of pity and fear, pity and terror, or pity and fear, which were very dangerous and unhealthy to Plato. It was dangerous and unhealthy according to Plato. But this forms the foundation of Aristotelian theory, because in him these two have different, pity and fear has different connotations. These emotions, they constitute this twofold reaction of the tragic suffering. Pity is aroused by what? Pity is aroused when we witness this tragedy, and it becomes, and it comes from the awareness of the tragic suffering. And this is somehow why these people, these critics of antiquity, still remain so relevant to us. This awareness of tragic suffering. And I don't think that we need, like, these things, these are no longer, or these were never printed words of novels, which, or something, this to see the awareness of a tragic suffering, or to feel the awareness of a tragic suffering, you don't necessarily have to read from the printed books, or we don't have to go to movie halls or theaters or stages. See, in this modern, this pandemic, this time of this pandemic, don't you think that this is kind of something that we all are going through, something that we have taken for granted, is the fact that a man is living because he breathes. From our class 1 to science books, when we have read about the differentiation between a living beings and non-living beings, the first point is that living beings grow and they breathe. This breathing we take it for so much for granted. But men around us, for the last few months, we have been saying that men cannot breathe. They are dying because they cannot breathe. We could never imagine that in this whole wide world, there is, what is it like? There is no restriction in anything. There can be restriction in your caste, your class, your gender, your anything, but not for breathing. Like, it's nothing that we ever thought of. But this is something that men cannot breathe, and they are going through this suffering just because they don't have, they cannot find enough oxygen. I don't think that anything is more tragic than this as living beings in this human world at present. Like, something which we have taken so much for granted, it all of a sudden, it becomes it becomes a luxury. Like, you have not been, you or your family or anybody has not been through this, and God forbid, none of us should. So this witnessing of tragedy, no, it's not like always you have to read somewhere, or you have to go to theaters and you have to see some movies, or you have to witness something and then you have to feel it. It is something of an inner awakening. It's something that you feel from inside. And that is why these people of antiquity are so much more relevant even today, because basic human instincts never change. What the heart feel, it's not that a heart felt like a particular way during the classical times, and then it felt a particular way during the Renaissance, and then it feels like a particular way. No, we only know it because we read it in books, that this age and this age and this age and this age. There are so many people, but basically so many people who don't even know about these ages and all that. It's because as students of English literature, we know about all these, and philosophers and all that. But the basic fundamental human instinct, the basic fundamental human emotions are always the same. across time, across space, across everybody, across everywhere. So, and that is why these when we read and reread all these great works of art, we can feel it, we can relate to it. So these feelings of catharsis, which actually is something that is a kind of a tragic awareness when we see it, or which should inwardly transform us. These have been there from the very beginning, and these are there even now. We read it or we don't read it. We know literature or we don't know literature. Literature comes only from life. And this kind of therapy, don't you think that we have been for the last 1 or 2 years, even if in a very small way, we have been thinking or looking at things a bit differently than we did before. We we don't really take things so much for granted anymore that we would have taken or we used to take 2 years back. I don't think we take it. If we are thinking, because human beings are thinking creatures, right? So if we are thinking creatures, I don't think that we think or we look at things or we look at situations or we look at life or we look inside us the same way that we had seen a few years back. And this is the kind of experience that a person used to go to the theater and experience it, this kind of inward transformation. Because catharsis, which is a purgation, which is something which is therapeutic, it changes inwardly, it has an inward change. Like like a tragedy which might be very important or very popular, it is not actually more than what is happening outside, more than the actions on stage. It is actually what happens inside. It is actually the transformation or the therapy or the inwardness, seeing or looking inside. That is what catharsis leads us to, and it's a kind of, so the vital part is actually suffering, and that is how true tragedy unfolds. And it is beyond any a particular a mere clinical or a surgical function. It is not only that. If it was only that, then men of literature would not have been essential in today's world. We keep on seeing videos of the doctors in COVID wards. They are singing to the patients, they are dancing to the patients. So many videos and all keep on circulating. If medical science or if it was the only thing that was essential, then these would not have become important. These would not have been circulated, and these would not have been performed or done actually, for a whole, no, it's not exclusive. Like, one thing is not exclusive of the other. You don't have to exclude literature in order to know science, or in order to give importance to the value of medicine and everything. You don't have to exclude one, or you don't have to exclude this for that. It is actually an inclusive thing, which makes, just like a human being, it makes it complete. As a society also, it makes it complete. One thing is as necessary as the other. It's like different organs which make a complete human body. The leg cannot do the work of a hand, and the hand cannot do the work of a leg. Both have their specific spaces, and both are as important as the other. And so this is how uh, Aristotle's catharsis works. Like, it makes us enter into a more noble, into a more spiritual kind of mental space, a more noble and spiritual kind of a life. Our mindset changes, our our way of looking at things, because it leads to a new awakening. It leads to a new awakening, and it also gives a new scale to our existence. That is why. And so he has many things. Now it is so much so very difficult to put this great personality as Aristotle in a nutshell. There can be nothing as difficult as this, but because this thing, catharsis is the key word, and how it works today also, and how is it relevant today also. We went only touched only these two areas, like and that is why this Aristotle had a very moderated tone. He was never into any kind of an extreme, like he keeps and because of his flexibility, because of his moderating tone, and because he doesn't appear to be dogmatic, that is why he has retained his relevance so much the more, because he never sees literature as far away from the study of life. It is, I told you, it is very intrinsic. It is related, very related. Like it is like an organ in a whole body. Because life and literature is very closely related to in him, and that is why, because of because this freshness and vitality he retains this freshness and vitality, and that is why he has been perennial. He has been always always so very relevant, and so many works has been throughout with time. Different works, literary works, have even if it's not based directly on his theories, he has been reinvented time and again. So if you do not reinvent theories, then those theories cannot live. It is only in reinvention, only in seeing things from the original thing, seeing it from different perspectives, that you keep it alive, and ticking. And one of the main reasons that it has been that for Aristotle, these two were the Greek counterparts, and of these four pillars. The third one, who comes much later, like after 3 centuries after, almost 3 centuries after, and belonged to Rome, is Horace, whose main work that you also have, and the most important work, as you know, is the Art of Poetry, or Ars Poetica. Horace was a contemporary of Virgil, and Horace, Virgil, Ovid, they all belonged to now that we call the Augustan age, the golden age of Roman literary theory. Horace is more practical and less philosophical than Aristotle. It's not something to be compared, but just because he comes, I'm telling him just after Aristotle, that he is less philosophical, more practical, and he gives more practical advice, because his poetry is this art of poetry is more about mostly about how to write correct poetry. And when he had written this Art of Poetry, Horace was more or less well versed in the other forms of the other poetical forms, like the lyric, then the pastoral, the ode, the satire, all this. And that is why his work, his treatise, it has a threefold structure. That is why, because it's first the content of poetry, then the style of poetry, and then later on he ends it up with a discussion of the poets, the great poets of Greek antiquity, like Homer and all. And for him, for Horace, decorum, poetic decorum is of primary importance, like the norms by which a work is to be judged, the structure, the form, and all that. And what he says that poetry should conform to all the principles and decorum. Like poetic license is not something to be stretched beyond limits. Because if poetic license is stretched, if the creative license is stretched, then the work becomes diluted. It loses its gravity. And so the poet must follow all the rules and regulations. So if it is like that, it is very normal that he would be somewhat lesser philosophical. No, because he is more concerned with the form and the structure and the decorum of a piece, of a text. The importance of gravity now of this classical rhetoric is something which he has always he has more or less stressed. And the students of literature, while critically analyzing a poem, should always keep in mind these forms and structures and the language and the diction and everything, and style and all that. So doing that, what happened, that in Horace, literature, it turned more into a study of philology more than philosophy, because he was so much more concerned with this what did I say, this structure and all. That is why it becomes more decorum and all that. That is why it becomes more, literature in Horace becomes more of a study in philology rather than philosophy. It is it turns more into a quantitative proportion rather than a qualitative proportion. But that is not to say that rhetoric in Horace is just a technical discipline. No, not that. Because according to him, this discipline should be grounded in moral principles, because it is related to law, it is related to ethics, it is related to philosophy. So that cannot be done away with. But with being grounded in these moral principles, work of art, it has to have these be within the presence of decorum. And Horace has been invoked by these neoclassicist poets like Dryden, Pope, and all, no, Johnson and all. So it has helped the poets, because he touches upon some very essential things which are also very true in making a work of art sustain its value over time. And he lays down certain set of principles which are actually true for all times. And that is why his influence has been felt during the later ages also, with the neoclassics, with the humanists, and all of them. And that is why his this art of poetry, it does exert, and it has always exerted a tremendous authority over the criticism and poetic creation of the Western world. It has. In the Roman literary critics, just like Plato and Aristotle are read in the similarities and differentiating points in the Greek pantheon, Similarly, in the Roman pantheon, this Horace is read in contrast with Longinus, and Longinus is our topic of study in this series. We are going to do it in the go through the text on the Sublime, and specifically on the chapters that I have been told to in the next class. I'll give you one very, very short. I'll go on with it in details in the next class, but just a few lines on Longinus. Some say earlier it was that whether he is from the 1st century or the 3rd, but now like it is Pseudo Longinus, as we know, as dating from in the 1st century. And you know, this Plato, not Plato, Aristotle, Horace, and Longinus, they usually form the triumvirate of classical literary theory, and Longinus is the third of this triumvirate, besides Horace and Aristotle. And he is someone who is evaluated on the basis of the literature of power. It's the quality, the literature of power. And it is literature of power and literature of knowledge. Two set of two different ways that we can see literature. Knowledge, literature of knowledge, it teaches us. It gives us more information. You know, it is like a vertical, it's like a horizontal movement that the more you read, like you gather information and you grow horizontally in literature of knowledge. You gain more. But literature of power, it's vertical. You know, you uplift the soul. It's not that like always you're gaining more knowledge. It's not always that you're gaining some empirical knowledge that, yesterday I did not know this, today I know this new information. It's not like that. Literature of power is not like that. It gives you this awakening more. It makes you more strong from inside, your awakening is that. And the purpose of literature, because purpose of literature of knowledge is to teach and to preach and all that. Literature of power heals you. Literature of power makes you look things more inwardly. Maybe you would not gain more and more information, but what you are going to gain is illumination. Okay, more light comes into inside you, or not only inside you, maybe that same one text you will read, but every time you read it, power gives you, like, the torch light shines a little more brightly on the page and you see things a little more brightly. So it gives you a kind of power to inspire also. Literature is not just sitting in the four walls. It's not like we read literature today, like in the classroom with a textbook, a very boring black and white, some words. It's not like that. Literature is a way of life, actually. It's how you live, how you see things, how you live, and how you can inspire. People don't have to be great leaders to always inspire people. You can inspire in a very small way, which will be a very big way to some other person. So that is why we should read literature. And that is why it will never lose its relevance. Know that no matter how much, like quote unquote, how much progressed a world becomes. So this is what the literature of power gives us. It's not something that you achieve by argument. Like, it's not something that you achieve by logic, but it is something that you achieve by illumination. So it's not propaganda. For Longinus, and for us, or for somebody who professes this literature of power, it is literature. It is not some kind of a propaganda, or it is not some kind of a sermon. It is not also some kind of an entertainment. It is a vision, actually. Literature of power is actually a vision. How you see it, how you look at things, how you see things. So, as I always tell my friend, your teacher, poet, Dr. Shyam Sudhakar, that poets are so different, you know. We cannot write poetry, like I cannot write a single line of poetry. But I have seen poets, like friends and all, who try write poetry. I said this to Shyam, that, you know, we see at the same thing all of us are seeing, looking at the same tree and the same flower, the same thing. But they see the same thing in a different way. They have that vision. They're, of course, very important in this world. Otherwise, the world would not be a place fit to live. Like if everybody sees things in the same way, and the world itself would turn into a machine. So it is a vision. The literature of power is a vision. It is the effect of literature. Now, this effect of literature is actually soul stirring. It has to do with the soul, and it is a kind of a soul stirring music, or a kind of what do I say? A kind of an incantation, a kind of a scriptural incantation. That is what literature of power gives us. It makes us see the world, but not only with our physical eyes. It makes us see and look at things with our inner eyes. Just like in King Lear, no, the Gloucester says, no, that till I was I see more after I have become blind. I see. That is the inner eye. That is most important, to see with the inner eye. Physical eyes, all of us we have, but what makes a few men different is that they have another eye also. They can see from the inner eye, and that is what the literature of power inspires us to do. It inspires us to see. It helps us to have this vision to see from the inner eye, and that can never lose its relevance. Not in any age, not anywhere. It cannot lose its relevance ever. So I think that is for today. I think I will go on with a little bit more of Longinus in the next day, before I go with start with this sublime thing. It is intentionally I did not use the word sublime. I want to go to it in the next class, like with this literature of power, which makes a work sublime. I think that is all I had to say today, if I was at all relevant.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk. So now the session is open for discussion. If you have any queries or something to ask, please feel free.
Ma'am, you said something about reinventing theories, old theories in this contemporary world. Could you please explain a bit on that?
Just look at things from a different perspective, like a basic human instincts or natures are same, but then the literature is what it is actually, or literature or a theory, it actually comes from that, like a definite period, a definite social, political or economic background, like, or cultural, political background. But when this background changes, even if the basic human beings are not changing, but then the background, these change, the society, the social background change, the political, the cultural background change. So if you to see the same theory from a different perspective, from the background of that particular age, like I'll tell you, see, what is this Greek this theory, the theory, Aristotle's concept of tragedy? It was, fate was so important, right? It is fatalistic, no? The Greek these plays, it was so much more fatalistic, right? Like, see, if you because you have read Oedipus, I'm telling you that all these oracles and everything, these led to his tragedy and all. What, like, he himself, how much is he doing, or how much he is acting on his own? Very little. But then when Shakespeare came with this Elizabethan tragedy period, he also kept the Aristotelian thing, fine. But then he made his characters more responsible for their downfall. Macbeth could well have not murdered the king, right? So he kept the Aristotelian doctrine, but he made his characters more responsible. And then the shift was in the nature of the tragic hero also, not the kings and the demigods from the classical antiquity, then the kings and the princes and the noblemen. And now you have the kitchen and sink drama, and you have all this modern play where in a tragedy you have the common man as the protagonist, because we cannot relate to kings and demigods and all anymore. So that is how one set theory, you need to reinvent it. Because if you keep on writing about, in this modern age also, if you keep on writing about all those kings and demigods and princes, people are not going to relate to that. So that is how, with time and with this change in the background in social and political and cultural, you have to reinvent those theories. Then only then I think that then it remains more alive. It doesn't become shelved.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, hi.
Your class was well organized and perhaps informative. What I have got is rather a doubt than a question, maybe. I have heard that when we try to trace the history of, or when we try to trace the trajectory of European literary criticism, it usually moves from that of high idealism to that of a kind of a materialism. Have heard so, and I think I have read it. So if that is true, if we can trace the kind of a movement from high idealism to that of materialism of later critics, is that trend visible within the ancient, within the classical age of criticism? Is that trend visible there, or is that only after the arrival of 20th century literary critics that this trend is visible? Ma'am, you're not audible, I guess.
Oh,
Ma'am, you're...
am I audible now? Materialism
Yes, ma'am,
in a kind in this classical antiquity criticism, like in the Greek pantheon, or in the Greco-Roman era.
Yes, ma'am. Is it visible there itself? That is, when we move from Plato to that of Longinus, a kind of a movement from idealism to materialism. Can we say it?
To materialism? No, I don't think the Greeks have ever shunned away with idealism ever. They have not done away with idealism ever, like the totally doing away with idealism. I have not come across Greek literary critics doing away totally with idealism. I haven't come across it.
Okay, ma'am.
I think it's a later development, right? No, Greek literary critics, no, I haven't come across doing away entirely with idealism. Idealism of one kind or the other. But idealism was there. Because, you know, Greek critics were actually philosophers. Then they were men of literature. It is philosophy which is a very ancient subject, like you know, no? Literature came much later. Theology, philosophy, then a later on theology. Literature came later. So philosophy was actually their foundation, their basis.
Yes, if there are no other questions, then we can wind up.
Someone I saw.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah.
Someone.
Aishwarya, okay.
No.
Yes, ma'am. I just had this thought throughout the class that people don't like criticizing themselves or with their lifestyles or dressing styles or whatever way they are. But ironical to that situation in literature, they emphasize on the fact that we should criticize. And I thought it was something ironical. But the question I have would be more of a supposition or will be a yes or no question. The question I have is that if, ma'am, you are given an opportunity to select between to become a writer, you're not audible, ma'am.
No, actually the voice is breaking. I can hear, and then some of the voice. Yeah, if you have an opportunity to become a writer, yeah, that.
Okay. A writer in the critical field, or as a writer, like a novelist or a poet, what would you choose? To be a critic or a novelist or poet or whatever it is?
I would always be a critic. I like finding faults. I would always be a critic. Being a critic is much more easier, I think. No, I will tell you something. Criticism doesn't always mean like a negative criticism. Criticism is a reading. Criticizing, like literary criticism, is not like criticizing someone's dress or something. It is actually a reading. It's a way. Now, I always think that if to literature to thrive, it will thrive if it is looked into, it is studied. It is not just that you study it, oh, very good, and then you leave it. It is not like that. It's a study, actually. It's a reading. It's not always negative criticism and all. And one thing I would say, these people who we make this hero worships, like because I'm from Bengal, I'm telling you, Rabindranath or Satyajit Ray, or people never criticize. Like, they are also human beings. Maybe 1 or 2 works out of 100 work, maybe 98 works are superb. But just as a human being, maybe 2 or 3 is not so much up to the mark. But we never talk about it. We are scared to talk about it. And because others will say, oh, how can you, being such a an average human being, how can you just judge somebody's work like this? If that happens, what suffers is actually literature suffers. And if given a choice, I would be a critic of others. Yeah, it is very. I'll be a critic. That is more easy, I think. Creation is not so easy. Creation is difficult.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, Sylvia. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Give me my question is very you talk about literature, how it forces you to get yourself and instincts, which is why it is this. So if you that has forced you to think inside yourself for a little bit.
Speaking, I can't hear actually at all.
Your voice is breaking.
Is someone speaking?
Yeah.
My voice? I am hearing in a broken voice.
Audible?
Yes, your order. Chanchal, please switch off your camera so that.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, can you try speaking?
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Chanjal, it would be good if you write the question in the chat box.
Chancel will write the question in the the chat box. Chancel is actually typing the questions, and meanwhile, if anyone wants to discuss something, then please come forward. Okay. So yeah, here we have. Can you, Dr. Anamika, can you see Chanjal's question?
Yeah. So my question is, you talked about the literature of power and how it influences one to look into yourself. Yes, it does. Oh, many. There are many. You know, a great piece of work, no? Crime and Punishment, to be sure, for the first, because I was a student then and it affected me a lot. I was so much influenced by Crime and Punishment. And 100 Years of Solitude is another that I can just comes to my mind. Many there are, actually. You know, any great piece of work, it will always lead you to a bit of soul searching. Not only this thing, even poems, plays, it will always lead to some soul searching. Of course, all of them. If it is touches, no, literature of power does that. No, it touches that chord somewhere inside. It touches that thing. And every time that is why it helps to inspire. And every time you come across one such kind of a sublime piece, I think even if a little bit, there's a shift, a change a little bit inside for the good or bad.
So I think that's all enough for today, because we are having another session on Thursday. So further doubts can be cleared in the next section. So dear ma'am, the session of the day was very informative and it's very relevant in the present scenario. And thanks for taking the session and for giving us an insight, and also for having a discussion session, and also for clearing our doubts and questions. And thank you, ma'am. And I also invite everyone to the next session that is to be conducted on Thursday. And once more, thank you, ma'am, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. You wind up the session.